Hi, my name is Shani, and welcome to the Experienced Designers podcast, where we explore the human experience, what it is, and how we might create better ones for ourselves and for others. When did doubt become a dirty word? In life, at work, we're often valued for our ability to provide answers and concrete outcomes. But this ambition to always give clarity might actually have us missing out on learning, connection, and evolution that we so desperately need as humans. Pia Lauritzen has spent her career researching the topic of questions. Combining a PhD in philosophy with tech entrepreneurship and writing, her mission is to democratize the power of questions. Together, we explore what potential and pitfalls a question holds, why we need questions, not just at work, but as human beings, and what is needed in us to use questions in the most powerful way possible, and how doubt actually plays a pivotal role in our ability to do that. Join us. Hi, Pia. Welcome to the Experienced Designers.
Hi, Shani. Thank you very much.
So, I had a look back at your CV after we had a first conversation, and you have spent an impressive 20 years researching the power of questions, which I think is fabulous because I myself am a huge lover of questions. So I'm really looking forward to where we're going to go with this. But you also run a digital platform that is designed to empower people to share responsibility and ask more. And you framed your mission as democratizing the power of questions, which is such an amazing phrase. And that leads me to my first questions, which is actually, I want to start with you. What led you to choose this thing and stick to it for so long?
That's a wonderful question. I especially like the stick to it because there are so many things, that we fall in love with and we spend time on, but it is actually a bit also unlike me to stay with the same topic for so long. I think it's because questions turned out, it took me a long time to realize that it was questions that I was so excited about. And when I realized it, it also became very clear to me very quickly that it's, you can study that for several lifetimes. It's not like you feel, well, now I know what I need to know about questions. It's just they keep surprising you. They keep coming up with another aspect of themselves. They keep telling a different story, and everyone around you keep demonstrating different ways of relating to questions and of using questions. So it just felt like, well, I will not have enough time in this life, but I can spend all I have exploring this. And combined with the fact that I realized in my research at the university that not many people have dedicated time to researching questions. And if they have a very narrow perspective on questions as a tool, as a technology, or something that is designed to help us get to the answers. But not that many people throughout history has actually spent the time focusing just on the questions for the sake of questions. So it feels like an okay thing to spend your life on.
I like that. And also the point that it provides us with sufficient variability to keep it interesting, which I can imagine. I guess that's why I also like questions that you don't really know what's going to come out the other side and what you're going to discover. But that also makes me curious because you've spent a lot of time on this. Why do you think questions are so important to us as humans and to our experience as humans?
I think they have this magical power of placing us kind of on an edge. We know that with questions comes answers. We know that questions, in the basic nature, there's a yes and a no. So, and that leads us to, there's a good and a bad question or a good and a bad answer. Something can be right or wrong. So all these, basic choices are built into the essence and the nature of questions, so to speak. So a question is it's never done. It's always, prompting us to evolve somehow, to learn something new, to connect with other people, because maybe they have some of the answers that we don't, and maybe they have some questions that we can help shed light on. So it's kind of like, being on Team Question is evolving, is developing, is connecting with other human beings, but also connecting with the world around us. Most people have had an experience, maybe several experiences of nature wanting something from them, or of going on a walk in the forest or something, and then you feel connected with something that's bigger than you, and it makes you wonder, or it makes you curious, or or it can do the opposite. Maybe you start to doubt something, or you're skeptic about something. So it's connected with a lot of very, very basic human feelings about being part of something bigger than themselves.
I really like that. Mm. You said a word here that I think is interesting, because often when we talk about questions, we focus on curiosity
Mm.
and it being this more inquisitive quality. But you talked about doubt.
Mm. I love
What
doubt.
what about doubt?
What about doubt? Well, I think it's spot on what you're saying. We love focusing on curiosity. Another family member, so to speak, of questions is creativity. We also like her. These are the fun twins of the question family, right? We want them in our lives, but we don't want doubt, and we don't want uncertainty, and we don't want skepticism. They are kind of annoying. It feels like they're slowing us down. It feels like, they are not helping us move forward, but that's not true. Doubt is extremely important, and it helps us distinguish, as I mentioned before, distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad, basically true and false. Am I actually talking to another human right now? Is Shani a machine? Very beautiful machine, very wise machine, but is she a machine? Right? Asking these questions is what helps us distinguish between what is worth my time and what is not worth my time, what is important and not important, relevant and irrelevant. And that's doubt helping us making these distinctions. Curiosity cannot do that alone. But for us to use our curiosity and our creativity in a valuable way, and not just running around, doing all kinds of stuff and being very busy, we need the doubt. We need the doubt to make sure that we spend our limited time, and we don't even know how much time we have, God forbid it, but within the next few days it could be over, right? So it's very important that we spend our time wisely. So we need the doubt. A machine doesn't, because it has endless time, endless capabilities. But I don't. If I spend my time with you now, I'm not spending my time with someone else. So I have to make that decision and saying, but you are the one I want to spend my time with right now. So I think it's a big mistake to try to minimize or avoid doubt. It's a very important guide in our lives.
I really like that. And it just makes me think also, if we look at the space of work in particular, then we often reward clarity and we almost demonize doubt.
Yeah, I agree.
And actually, I just find it's a weird irony, because you said doubt and then that helping us spend our time wisely. What does it then do to us if we aren't spending time with our doubts? I
Yeah.
think that for me is a really big thing. And how maybe why do you think we avoid it?
I think that um, that's why I love spending time with questions, because if we just, there are a lot of people being experts in curiosity or writing and talking a lot about curiosity. And I love curiosity too. But broadening the game, so to speak, and saying, no, it's not just curiosity, it's questions. Then we get, then we get acquainted with the bigger context of questions. And just like most other things, they have, a front and a back. And we really love the front of questions, but the dark side, so to speak, the back, we tend to forget. And we tend to forget that with every question, it's not only opening up something, it's also closing down something. So when I ask a question, or when you ask me a question, you kind of invite both of us to focus on something and not something else. And all the things you leave out, we will not discuss, and we will not, we will not explore, and we will not become wiser on all the things you leave out. And that's a good thing. You make that decision. This is your podcast. That's how it's supposed to be. But if we always have the same people asking questions and the same people responding, then it goes without saying that we have, a power, a constitution where some people and their perspectives and their curiosity and their doubts or their creativity is being left out of the equation. And that can be, it's so much easier to ask the questions yourself. So you decide. And we see that in companies, we do surveys, we do interviews, we do coaching. So we have these people, few people actually, compared to the whole amount of people working in an organization, few people asking questions, and the rest of the people working in an organization and the customers, in customer satisfaction surveys and stuff like that, they are being turned into respondents. So they are supposed to react. They are not supposed to be proactive, and they're not supposed to interact with each other about what's important. They're just supposed to react and be respondents. And that means that and that's back to, the democratizing aspect of my work. What we're doing is that we are monopolizing the power of questions. We're saying that some people and their perspectives are more important than other people's perspectives. And it's the minority that has the power to ask questions, whereas the majority is supposed to just react. So there are power structures involved with questions, and we kind of forget that. We forget that we are not only questions are not only powerful in the sense doing good. They can also, when they are being monopolized, do bad, and they can leave out important perspectives. But we don't think about it that way. We don't talk about it that way. And if we do, it kind of feels more safe to just continue doing what we're used to doing. So the questions and the variety of questions, not only being about curiosity and creativity, but also being about doubt, and being about exclusion, and being about sorting people into two kind of people: those whose questions we care about and those whose questions we don't care about. They are just respondents. These are all the dark sides that comes with questions. So it's kind of like, either people forget that the questions are powerful, or they don't have an interest in sharing this power with others, because it becomes more difficult. The more people asking questions, the more diversity, in the conversation. But I strongly believe, and I've seen it again and again and again, that it's definitely not a waste of time making room for other people's questions, because the second you do that, it turns out that you can move much faster afterwards, because now people know what's important to us as a group instead of just what's important to you or me.
Mm. Mm.
I'm actually not sure I answered your question there.
No, but sometimes conversation also flows in different directions, and I'm always open to that. And I don't even know what my initial question was.
Maybe did you ask why we didn't want doubt? Maybe that was your question. I'm not
Maybe
sure.
that was my question. I don't know. I was following your train of thought here, and I was and I was really fascinated by this thing that you were talking about, which is questions as a mean of distributing power and responsibility.
Mm,
And I can really recognize this dynamic that you talk about in terms of there being one group that gets to ask and then the other one that always is answering, but where we're not asking them for their questions, we're asking them for their answers.
mm,
We're not asking them about their doubts or their insecurities or whatever it is that their discomfort is. We're just asking them to answer. As you say, we're already narrowing down the field, and I
mm.
can see that also when we in working with experience design. And we always say, don't ask people for wish lists. Like, that's not what we're doing. That's too narrow field. Say, tell me what the solution is to this exact problem. No, don't tell me that. Tell me what is the challenge surrounding this for you. What are the questions and doubt actually, like asking people about what are the questions that you
Mm.
have around this issue or around this train of actions that you are taking part in, or in different ways, kind of inviting that conversation. And ironically, I think it creates a lot of insecurity for the people who have to drive that dialogue. So I'm wondering also, like, what have you found? How do we equip ourselves to make more space for doubt and questions rather than just curiosity? Because, as you say, curiosity is very positively
Mm,
geared,
mm,
which is maybe something we kind of feel more inclined to, whereas doubt can be uncomfortable, and there is more unknown.
mm.
Well, there is a lot of unknown in curiosity as well, but it's somehow coming from a very different angle. So what do we need to practice ourselves?
I think you answer something really important there when talking about the unknown, because you know there's a German philosopher, Gadamer, Hans-Georg Gadamer, who said, and he's actually one of the few who did spend some time on understanding questions for the sake of questions. And he said that there is no such thing as a method for learning how to ask questions. And that's kind of interesting because everyone, when they learn that I have spent 2 decades exploring the power of questions, that's always the first thing they ask me. Okay, so how do I get better at asking questions? And what is a good question? How do I help other people ask good questions? That's typically also a question I receive. And that means that most of us assume that we can learn how to ask good questions, and there's a method, or I can tell them, oh, well, do this, this, and that, and then you will ask good questions. But what Gadamer says is that there's no method. What it comes down to is knowing that we don't know. So it's tapping into the unknown, as you mentioned, is accepting the fact that here there is something that I don't know, and I'm okay with admitting that I don't know it. So I have to be there, I have to be willing to share. The first step is to share it with myself, to realize that is actually, here there is something that I don't know. And then I have to be willing to share it with others too, and say, I know maybe you would expect me to know this. But in fact, I don't. And that's a good thing, because that means that now we can learn together. Now, we can explore this together. So being willing to tap into the unknown is crucial in asking questions, in guiding your curiosity. and not just being curious about everything. That's okay. You can be curious about everything, and most children are. And then we start to, either we become more curious about something than something else, but we also start to develop our curiosity. We find out that curiosity is it's not just one thing, it's several things. And at this stage I'm curious in this way, and in this stage I'm curious in another way. But if you're not willing to take it from a place where you don't know, yeah, then it's just, it will be limited how much you can learn and how much you can grow based on that. And I think that is really also an extremely important part of the answer. If your question before was, why don't we want the doubt? I think an answer to that question is because we are raised in a way, and we are, put into this world in a way where we have the feeling that we're supposed to know. Even back to Adam and Eve, we want that apple. We want to know. So, and we tell each other that it's the people who know who will get the promotion. It's the people, to get an education, you need to know a lot of stuff. So there's a lot going on with this knowledge. Knowledge is a good thing. We even say knowledge is power, and we want the power. So being familiar and okay, being around the unknown, it's not what we were taught to do. But it's extremely difficult doing valuable science and valuable research without tapping into the unknown. That is impossible. Every scientist knows this, but somehow among some, teachers and leaders and project leads and stuff like that, it gets lost, and it becomes what we know that's important rather than what we could know.
Yeah. I like that. And it reminds me of something that I've heard you talk about before, which is also that we guide our questions with assumptions rather than with the I don't know. And I see that too as well in the practices that we do with designing as well. It's so very easy to come into a space with an assumption of what it is going to be. And I've seen it 1,000 times. And then all the questions go towards proving that one assumption, but actually you didn't find anything out. You're just proving or disproving your assumption, but you didn't actually explore anything. You didn't actually learn anything. You didn't actually evolve based on those questions, because all you did was create a very, very narrow path for exploration. And so, yeah, I think I heard you say kind of there's no right way to work with questions, but are we getting something wrong as we're doing it now? What are we? Because I've heard you talk about this kind of the assumption basis and the starting from this point of I have to know, or I have all the knowledge. Is there any way of doing it really badly?
Isn't it interesting that you're the first person on earth asking me that? When I think
I'm not surprised, but yeah.
That is really interesting. Yeah, but it's not, I don't think it's what we would guess it would be, the wrong way of doing it. And it doesn't necessarily have that much to do with what we're doing, but more with how we're feeling when we're doing it. And it's not like you can have a wrong feeling, but you can definitely, I think we can feel insecure about the wrong things. Because I haven't been asked this question before, I haven't thought about it before, but I think that would be my first step in trying to answering it. That I think sometimes we feel insecure about things that we shouldn't feel insecure about, that we should, feel okay with being insecure about, because it's kind of like, that's what we have in common, not knowing how to connect good with each other, or not knowing how to, feeling insecure on how to learn something new. That is kind of the basic. That's what we have in common. And we should make sure to share that. We should make sure that every time we feel unsure, we share it, because that's when it's easiest for us to connect with each other. When we are explorative ourselves, when we are doubtful ourselves, when we are curious ourselves, other people, it's so much easier for other people to take an interest in us and to care about us. So when we don't share that, it's kind of wrong. But I know we have good reasons to do that. It's because we're afraid. We're afraid of being perceived in a way that makes us look not wise, or not, I don't know, capable, or not competent. So we have all these good reasons to be insecure, but that's listening to those reasons rather than the insecurity itself can be a wrong decision. I don't know if it makes sense.
No, I mean, what I'm hearing is when we kind of are not meeting in our doubts, when we are meeting from a point of view of, how do I put this? If we're meeting from this point of view, you talked about insecurities and grounding into our not knowing. So if we're meeting from a point of arrogance or assumption, or in some way not being authentic with where we are when we're asking the question, then that might be a way to go down a not desirable path. I don't want to say it's necessarily bad, but maybe it won't bring you as far as you could have gone if you chose to anchor in your doubts.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about an example. My daughter recently started at her first job. And it's it's in the service industry, so she's having a lot of people passing by, and she's helping them in a supermarket, and a lot of in the beginning she has to learn a lot, and she, of course, she makes a lot of mistakes, and she has she's coming home telling me about her experiences. And I think she's been at work twice or something like that. 2 times, I think she went away, and she came back, and then she realized that if she just immediately after she makes a mistake says, "Well, that's my fault. I'm sorry. Everything. I will do whatever I can to fix this," then it's almost impossible for people to be mad at her. They don't. They're not even annoyed. It's kind of like, "Oh, you couldn't. It's not your fault. It's okay. Everything." Whereas if she just waits 10 seconds to say, "Well, that's my fault. I'm sorry," then people get annoyed and kind of, and it becomes, then it's so much more work afterwards, making it good again. So it's kind of like, and I think it's the same with doubt and insecurity. If we start out by communicating from a place of course, I don't know everything, I was never asked that question before. Give me some time to, find out where I want to go with this. And I'm still learning over here. Then you help me and you say, "I think, could it be this?" And what I hear you saying, and then we can help each other. So if we start out by sharing that, it becomes so much easier to connect, and it becomes so much easier to learn. And if we have to do it later, if I had spent 30 minutes telling you I'm the expert here, I know everything you want to know, you just ask and I will give you good answers, then we would probably, I know I would not learn as much, at least.
No.
And
I think that's interesting. It's also that we miss out on the exploration when we come from this
that's a
absolute
good way of putting it.
perspective.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. On both parties, right? It's not like only I miss out on the exploration. We both kind of miss something, right?
Yeah. No, I like that. For me, it also ties in, what resonates for me when I'm listening to you is that questions are an invitation, as you were saying before, to share responsibility, to create something together. It's not about who has the answers necessarily. Actually, it's about how we can use the questions as this kind of ping pong to, going back to what you were saying in the beginning, like to evolve and learn and relate. And that's the thing we want to achieve, not the answers. And I think just like following our train of thought and our conversation here, and it just what lights up in me is I'm thinking, yeah, that's what I like about questions too myself, is that it's this playground for something you can do together. And and why, maybe, and that's my personal bias, I always feel like when it is that one-sided, as you describe it, when there's only one asking and the other one answering, then it feels kind of shut down to me. It feels a little bit flat, and there is no real exchange. It's more transactional. There's not like, it's not mutual.
Mm.
So
And I
yeah, I
think what you
really
did
like it.
there is you actually just described the basic difference between human interaction and interacting with AI,
Ah, let's
and
go down
machines.
there. Yeah.
Because you can design computers to ask you a question. How are you? How can I help you today? And a lot of chatbots are designed to interact. But the exploration part you just talked about, are machines curious? Do they doubt anything? Do they ever know that that's something they don't know? If they do, I would say they're doing a really good job covering it up. But of course they don't. They don't know they don't know. That is a human condition. And that's what makes us ask questions from this explorative place. That's what makes us doubt ourselves. That's what makes us skeptic. When someone say something, and we're kind of like, is that really the case? Are you sure? Asking those kind of questions, it can be extremely annoying, but it's extremely valuable as well, because that's where we kind of insist on quality. It's not like I don't want anything from anything. I want something from someone. So I think the aspect that you're bringing in here on, if the really valuable aspect of question is the exploration and the interaction, and the taking turns, as you kind of demonstrated before. I say something, you say something, you ask a question, I pick something up in what you're saying, and turn that into some kind of question. This taking turns is extremely important in understanding the power of questions. That it's not just about technique. It's not, and that's also what Gadamer said. This is not something you can be taught. This is not following this A, B, and C, and then you will be able to D. No, that's not how it works. It's something else. And I have actually no doubt that we will not be able, and we should not strive at designing machines that can mimic that, because that is what makes us unique. This ability to put ourselves in another position and saying, okay, so now I have been asking all the questions. I wonder what that feels like to Shani, just being, showered with questions and never being able to ask her own questions. If it was me, I probably wouldn't feel it. I would feel it a bit, well, I don't know what the right word is, but I would like to make this into a dance. I would like to dance with her. I just don't want to stand here and she's doing all the work. I have some ideas too. And that's something extremely valuable. And I'm not sure why we try to make it less than it is by saying that a machine can be intelligent and it can interact. And I'm really not sure why we're doing that. I don't know. Maybe you have an idea.
I don't know. I feel like there is so much I don't know is my first answer. But where my thoughts go is, I feel like there's a lot born out of this need for efficiency and speed,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's just this desire to enhance. And I think when it comes to AI and technology, admittedly, I'm very much a person who is I'm not a first adopter. I'm not the person who runs into those things. I think I always sit on the fence and I wonder, okay, how can I approach these things from a place of wondering how it will enhance me and enhance, not dehumanize me, but enhance me, and not dehumanize other people, but enhance them. And I think that's where my that's where my questions are at the moment with these things. And yeah, I find it hard to say like why we think we need it. Personally kind of feel like it's a little bit, it can send us down a hole of being very disconnected from ourselves, and actually being disconnected from all of these things that we talked about, our
Mm,
doubts,
mm.
our insecurities, our dance with other people. And yes, I think where I am wanting or trying to explore this is rather, okay, how can I understand this and how might I see how we can use this to enhance these things about ourselves instead? That would be my hope and wish for it. But then, yeah, that said, as I'm on the fence, I'm not necessarily the one with my head deepest into it. So yeah,
But I think
it's
that's also what I'm trying to do, in the sense that instead of asking, how can I use this technology, I'm very, very curious about what can I learn about human beings by observing what they expect and what they assume they can use a machine for, so because
mm,
it's so easy to be fascinated, being a tech entrepreneur, building technology myself. Of course, I'm fascinated by all these things, and I have been involved in a project where we explored and designed AI features in the Quest for the Quest platform. But we never ended up doing it, and that was because I could see I was not able to find a way where I could use AI to help and enhance, as you say, and actually help people be better at what they're doing, without them giving away responsibility that I think is extremely important. So every time we wanted to help, the user with AI, we realized that we would prevent them from doing something else, and that the thing we were preventing them from were more important than the help we would be able
mm,
to give them. So making basic decisions about what is important in this data set, and that's back to what we talked about before. Every time we ask a question, we look at something and not something else. And you cannot design anything technologically or anything else without asking questions. But when you build technology based on your own questions, then you make it even harder for the people using their technology to ask their own questions.
yeah.
So I realized that, with this kind of technology that I'm building, because I think that's what the world needs. They need technology that helps them be more curious, be more doubtful, be more connected, and collaborating on solving important problems. That's kind of the mission of the technology I'm building. If that's what I want to do, AI is not an option. And then that's the foundation for my observations at the moment, to see how come so many people are not asking these kind of questions when it comes to technology. How come so many people are not asking, what am I prevented from doing right now by using this technology? So I can see how it promotes something, but I cannot see what it prevents. That seems to be the blind spot, or the in how a lot of people engage with technology.
Mm, I really like that angle. It makes me think of, I have kids 5 and 8, and they're obviously growing up in this on-demand era of
Mm,
everything.
mm,
And it's really interesting because when you're asking this question, what is it preventing? And I keep observing this. I remember when I grew up, it was, 6:15 every day was the kids' show on TV. You sat down, whatever it was, something you like, something you didn't like. That was the time, that was the place, that was it. There was nothing else. And now they have so much choice, and it's at their fingertips. And I sometimes feel like actually what it's preventing them from doing is making decisions, but actually back to my initial question is sticking to them and like sticking something out and seeing them like watch a full episode of something. They can just stop, they can fast forward, they can do whatever they want. And quite often, and I talk to other parents and they go crazy. We all say like they're watching these 5-minute things and you keep hearing the jingle every 5 minutes, and then they watch 10 episodes and it's the same jingle. Or they're watching this movie and they're fast forwarding through things that they don't like. And so yeah, I love that question, because I see it with a lot of technological interaction that sometimes is even me, like I find myself unable to make decisions about things because there is so much choice, and let alone them, they're still small. But yeah, I really, really like that angle. What is it actually preventing us from doing it? Is that a capacity that we would like to have as humans? And I kind of think my decision making and my resilience and my ability to stick something out is quite important, actually.
Yeah, but I think you're putting your finger at an extremely important aspect, and again, extremely basic human. You're talking about time and place. What digital technology and artificial intelligence, what it is doing to us is that it kind of tells us that we don't have to be conditioned by time and place. It kind of tells you, you can watch whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you are. And that's a lie. That's just not how it works. We are conditioned by time and place. I cannot see what's going on outside my window right now because I'm looking at you. And, I cannot spend my time with other people being in London right now because I'm in Copenhagen talking with you. So we are constantly limited and conditioned by time and place. That's part of being human. Again, unlike machines, they are not. They can be several places at once and they can do several things at the same time, but we can't. So this promise from digital technology and artificial intelligence in particular, it's a big lie. And I'm really, truly worried about the kids growing up being told that lie all the time, because it makes it so much more difficult to deal with the things that cannot, that they are growing older, and they do, they do have a body that they need to take care of, or it will hurt, and it will, there are so many things that we cannot just outsource or pretend that is not the case. It makes it more difficult to be human than it needs to be. So asking these questions, what does it prevent me from doing? What is truly important to me? The things we talked about earlier, with doubt, the distinctions between what is important right now. How do I want to spend my time? Asking these questions, it is essential for us to stay human in a tech-obsessed world. And what we tend to forget, and this is another German philosopher called Martin Heidegger, he actually wrote an essay, or he gave a talk, and then it was written down, and now it's an essay about technology. And his it was in 1954. His very important point that unfortunately only a few people heard was that it's part of the essence of technology to prevent us from asking these questions. So technology doesn't want us to ask these questions, because when we ask these questions, can I really use the technology for this? Then there's a risk we won't use the technology. And that's not in the interest of technology. So this is not about the technology being conscious or anything else. This is simply about, technology is designed to be used by a user. Yep. If the user is not interested in using it, it loses its, value. So it's part of the essence. It's the essence of technology to prevent us from asking these questions. So we need to help each other do it, because we are all that's, we are all we have.
This makes me think of earlier this year, I had another guest on the podcast. Her name is Karina, and she's an oncologist and a psychiatrist, and she works in palliative care. And I just recently spoke to her this week, and she's working on this project around what they're calling existential well-being. And I think she touched on a lot of the things that you are talking about too, of this recognition that, you know, we have this body, we have this life, and we're all like, we all have these existential questions, these separation, these little deaths and big deaths in our life, and things that prevent us from actually recognizing that and building our resilience around it. They're not that good for us
Mm,
necessarily.
mm,
They are not that good for our bodies. They're not that good for our mental state, for our spiritual well-being, or however we choose to define it. But um yeah, she when I spoke to her, she also brought it back to a lot of the things that we've been talking about and you've been highlighting around creating connection
mm,
and building relationships and being connected to ourselves and our own doubts and
mm,
insecurities, and being connected to that in other people, and how important that is for our, not just existence, but our thriving within
mm,
that existence,
mm.
and feeling well and good, and actually enjoying our life as it kind of passes and we go through it. So yeah, I hear a lot of this, and I love the point that you're making around really asking ourselves, what's it preventing us from doing, and how, yeah,
I think
how
there
might
are,
we be human.
yeah. I think there are three very big areas of, I've kind of made it my, at the moment I'm writing another book, and I'm very much focusing on what I would call, the questions that cannot be answered by a bot. So we have these questions as human beings that are, no matter what we do, no one can answer them for us, and least of all a machine. But you cannot answer the questions for me either. And these basic three categories of questions, I call them the three big E's. It's the existential questions that you just mentioned. It's the ethical questions. Typically, when we talk about AI and technology and people talk about ethics, it becomes something about regulations. It becomes something about, how to use data and how not to use data. That's not all of the ethical things we could be discussing. We could be discussing what is it doing to our relationship with each other, our ability to make good decisions and respect each other, and stuff like that. We should be discussing that within the ethical department as well. And finally, there is the epistemological, the things that has to do with how we know what we know. And that's extremely important when we're talking about doubt, that we actually make room for us to say, am I sure that this is something I know? Or is this just an assumption? Is this just something that is this a bias? Is this something that, I think I might have heard, I know? Or is this something where I should ask more questions? And these three, the three big E's, as I call them, I think we should really work very systematically with them within our own lives and in organizations and in society, and really acknowledging these kinds of questions is kind of like they are what makes us human, is our ability to ask these questions and to help each other come up with answers. Not necessarily, or typically, or maybe never, it would be answers that last for a lifetime, but that we should ask them anyway. Or maybe that's the reason we should ask them, because they change all the time. The questions asked and the answers asked change, and that's why we need to continue asking them. So I think it kind of feels like people get stuck in one of them sometimes, so some people talk about the existential question, some people talk about the ethical, and some people talk about the epistemological. But in fact, they belong together, at least when it comes to being human.
Mm.
That's the questions we need to ask ourselves and each other.
I really like this distinction, and that you're bringing in the different facets. And also what you said about this, most things are true now and in this context. And then we have to be willing to ask the questions again
Yeah.
and come up with different answers
Yeah.
somewhere down the line. And sometimes down the line is 5 years, but sometimes down the line is 5 days
5 minutes.
or
Yeah.
5 minutes. We don't know.
No.
Um, yeah. And, sometimes what we think is a sure thing is not. Yeah. Personally, I try to practice that with myself, like openness to that things can change. And even when I try to entertain a lot of options, I try to listen to things that seem really out of my like context or theories that I'm like, I don't know if I connect to this. But then sometimes you listen and go, yeah, you know what? I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe in 5 years somebody's going to come and say, yeah, this is everyone's saying this is the truth, because it's happened so many times in history
Yeah.
that we've done this. But
Yeah.
yeah, it just leaves us with a lot of doubts all the time.
Yeah, but then again, you can look at it in two ways. I think you can look at it as, everything is floating and everything is a doubt, and you will always, you will never be sure, and that's one way of looking at it. But that's again why I really love the idea of questions instead of uncertainty. I could work with curiosity, I could work with uncertainty, but I insist on working with questions because they are the broadest. It's the broadest way of dealing with some of these basic human features, I think. But also because I think questions and their connection to answers helps me understand that, I'm supposed to ask the questions. I'm supposed to come up with my answers. And every time I come up with an answer, it feels like now I'm certain. Now I know, right? And even though that's just maybe for 5 minutes or for 5 days or for 5 years, the period of time where I feel I know is an important aspect of it. And it's not like everything is always moving. That's not how we are. We know
Mm,
how to take one step in front of the other. We know how to do this instead of that. So we are not these uncertain, insecure creatures, always shaking, always being, oh, now I don't know, now I don't know, now I don't know. You know, a lot of the time we actually do know, and we need to help each other trust ourselves when that is the case. So
mm,
it's not about, my passion for question is not about saying, oh, you should always question everything. No, it's just not being too certain to learn something new. So it's like they come, and then we're back to the dance. They come in pair. We ask a question, we are curious, we explore something, an answer presents itself. So, well, that might be a good answer. In this conversation, both of us several times have said, oh, that's interesting what you said there. Or, that means we're feeling that we're getting closer to an answer that we can use
mm,
for something.
mm,
So we should really help each other not to neglect that and not to distrust everything, because there is a lot to trust. There's a lot of
yeah.
feeling connected and knowing. I know things without knowing why I know them. And that's
Mm,
enough.
yeah.
That's good.
Mm. I really like that you brought that in, that dynamic between the question and the sense of knowingness and sense of certainty. And I think I can only draw a parallel here to like working on personal growth, or if you're trying to build a new habit, then first you're exploring like what would make me feel good. What type of thing. Personally for me, I think there's this period of curiosity about something, which is like, it's not as much a question, it's more, is this what I thought it would be? Like, I'm more checking it against my initial certainty.
Yeah.
And then there's a period of trust, but then there still has, as you say, then we kind of loop back to, is this really still serving me this purpose? Maybe
Mm.
I need to be asking a different question. Maybe I need to unravel a new layer here, and it leads me to refine something, to make a different decision. But I really like that, because as you say, if we can never trust, then we can never go anywhere either. We're
No.
also always do I put left or right first?
Yeah.
Where do I go? Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I have had so many interesting thoughts during this conversation, but I think here's how I'm thinking. I'm curious about two things. How do we empower, what's something we can do to empower other people to ask more questions, and whatever comes to mind for you. Um but then also, what's something we can do on a personal level, what's something I can do to use questions in a more empowering way in my life? What are some of your practices?
Yeah. The first one, I have had, I think, I spent a lot of time on that, because when I realized that this monopolization is going on, I was really, and that I had the monopoly somehow, being a consultant, being a mother, being, just a person that talks a lot. I am definitely one of the person that people having taking this monopoly, being a philosopher, being brought up by Socrates, asking all the questions all the time. When I realized that, I really, really wanted to find out, how this fascinating, how this empowering feeling of being curious, of being doubtful, of being, all these things, how I could share that with others, how I could democratize it. And I think it's been a tough journey, actually, because I couldn't, it's like change. You cannot ask other people to change. You can do that, but you don't. Doesn't change anything. And it's the same thing with questions. You cannot just say, be more curious or ask more questions. You have to do something else. And I actually talked with Amy Edmondson about it at some time, about this, the connection to psychological safety. And I think she also wrote about it, with questioning that to create an environment, to cultivate an environment where people feel comfortable asking questions is crucial, because they know how to do it. Everybody knows how to ask questions. So that's not the issue. And even if they didn't, we know from Gadamer that we wouldn't be able to teach them. So it's something else. And that something else has to do, from my perspective, it has to do with trust. It has to do with creating situations where you trust the people you're with enough to be silent long enough for them to come up with their own questions. Or it doesn't have to be questions, but just, communicate what's on their mind. So the best thing you can do in order to help other people be more curious or ask more questions or share more of their doubts and uncertainties is simply to trust that they will, if you shut up long enough, and and if you demonstrate rather than telling, if you demonstrate that you will be here for whatever questions they have, for whatever uncertainties they want to share, you will take the time, you will be patient, and you will trust that they know what's important for them to bring up. And that is counterintuitive for many talking, monopolizing people like myself. It's really counterintuitive. I would ask a lot of questions instead, or I would comment all kinds of things because I want to show you I really care about you. And I think a lot of people are thinking, nice, but I'm not going to say anything then. Then you can dance, right? So yeah, I think that's what I have for the first one, at least. And maybe it's the same, with the second. Actually, what can I do myself? Well, I have to practice being silent. in order to hear my own questions. What is actually going on right now? What is, as you mentioned before, what are the important questions right now? I have to be silent in order to hear that. But also in order to hear what could be questions coming from outside, coming from my kids, coming from nature, coming from my husband, coming from my colleague. I hate it is so difficult, but it is. And that's just, it is difficult.
Yeah.
And if someone said I have built an AI that can make it easy, I would say then you didn't build an AI for that. You build an AI for something else, because it's not easy.
No.
And everyone and anything that tries to make it easy has misunderstood what it's all about. It's about embracing the difficult, the uncertainties, the doubt, the unknown. And you know how to do it. Everyone knows how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer a lot of things that we know we forget in the way that we're set up in our society, in our workplaces. But I totally agree. I think we have much more capacity to connect, to be with our discomforts, to be with our doubts than we are making use of.
Yeah.
And quite often when I get tech questions, I usually just turn around and point at people and say, I think this is the most advanced tech you have in this room.
Yeah.
Are you aware?
Yeah.
I humbly say I'm figuring this out even on my own level. How do I make use of the potential that exists within myself and explore that with a lot of questions, but definitely. And also, like we were saying about ease, I think we're always looking for easy, and maybe that's not the question. Maybe it's about making it manageable. Or
and navigating the uneasy, right? And being okay. So trusting that just because it's not easy, it doesn't mean it's wrong. And what am I supposed to learn here? When I tell people that I'm writing another book, they're always, asking, a lot of them are asking, are you using ChatGPT or another, I'm kind of like, no, because I'm not writing the book to write a book. I'm writing the book to learn something, to think, and I wouldn't do that if I outsourced it to a machine. Then it would probably learn something, in the way it is learning. But I want to learn that, that I learn by the struggle of, I've been writing the same introduction to the same article for the past week, and it's still not done. And I love that I can't figure it out. I hate it too,
Yeah, no, I get it.
But I also love it, and I don't want anyone to take that away from me. And that's just an example, but I think there are tons of examples like that if we really just, asked ourselves, why is it that I am doing this when I hate it so much, we would realize it's because we also love it, and because it's doing something for us, But
yeah, I like that. It made me think of this summer. I had the privilege of sitting in an ayahuasca ceremony with a tribe from the Amazon, the Awanawa.
Okay.
And they chant throughout the night, so every song, and it's a pretty intense physical experience.
I can imagine.
But their approach in it is like, before every song they're like, hold on tight, like hold on to yourself here, and then whatever happens to you and your body and your mind. And then towards the end they go, yoo-hoo! And I remember this feeling of like, actually, like, yeah, that was hard, but it was also amazing. And I kept thinking, I should do that more often in life when I've had this, as you're saying, this week or however long time you're sitting with something that you're simultaneously loving and hating, and just go, whoo, okay, wow, like that was a trip. That was something amazing. And we kind of get stuck in the hardness of it, but actually it's that, like, the ease, and that there's fun in that experience too, and you get to finish on that note if you want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of, it reminded me of that, and it was a good reminder. Thank you. I need to pick that back up into my life. Also, like, celebrate that friction a little, I
Yeah.
think, and that you sit through it and that you go through it, and yeah, it's all a process. Oh, we could go on, and maybe we'll have more conversations, quite simply. I've super enjoyed talking to you and digging into questions with you, Pia. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to our exploration and dance with questions and doubts. I hope this episode brought you some new insights and topics to stop and wonder about. And if it did, please share it with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts and explorations as well. If you want to support the Experienced Designers podcast and keep digging into interesting topics together with us, please make sure you are following us on your preferred platform, or even better, share this episode with someone you think could really benefit from it. And if you have any reflections, suggestions, or questions to share with us personally, the easiest way to find us is through LinkedIn. After all, better experiences are born from iterating together.